Episode 4, bringing us now halfway through the season, starts us off in the Grey Havens, where after what seems like weeks of delaying, Elrond and Galadriel are finally leaving for Eregion. Because it's not as if Sauron hasn't been there for weeks trying to take over the world or anything, which Galadriel, Elrond and Gil-galad knew about. Or at the very least knew Sauron needed Celebrimbor. Galadriel even had herself a vision, and it took them this long to send people. But I suppose what counts is that they're going now, although they had to assassinate all 3 of them before we got here. Elrond asks for Galadriel to recommend him an archer and 2 swordsmen, although later they also have an elf with a map. So they're going to Eregion with a group of only 6, which isn't exactly enough when they might be going up against Sauron. This was of course Gil-galad's idea because apparently they don't have an army, even though we see them in the episode's opening shot. So they should be sending a lot more, but then again, Gil-galad isn't the most intelligent. Elrond asks if he can trust her in recommending an archer and 2 swordsmen, and we're given a typical response.
Trust? Me? Are you certain that's wise, Commander?
I can't cope with the stupid bitchy! Understand?
Why do they go out of their way to make her so unlikable when she's supposed to be the protagonist? But no, she's pissed off because Elrond is in charge, not realising she shouldn't even be going to Eregion. I don't know why Elrond would even agree to her going, especially when she has the ring that he doesn't yet trust. But apparently Gil-galad forced him to take her when just 2 episodes ago he denied her in going to Eregion, on the basis that Sauron could potentially corrupt her, believing that once Sauron gains someone's trust, like he did with Galadriel as Halbrand, gives him full control over whoever that someone is. All that made him change his mind was the idea of her going with a group for some reason, as if that changed anything. We're also told Gil-galad urged him to appoint Galadriel as First Lieutenant, a duty that he says if she deems beneath her, he'll choose another. So basically, she's just really salty about not being in charge. Why would it even matter to her that much when all that's important is reaching Eregion? The writers just seem that hell-bent on showing her to be a constant pain in the arse, which in no way pulls viewers into the show. Our team of heroes make their way to Eregion on foot. For some incredibly stupid reason, they didn't think that maybe they should bring horses when they're in a race against time. The first thought that came to me was maybe that had something to do with the terrain? But no, this is apparently the fastest route to Eregion, leading to a bridge which tells me this is a main route. So not taking horses is a really bad decision, especially when, as we're told at the start of the episode, their journey is 450 miles. They haven't brought food or anything to camp on, which I would understand somewhat if your intention was to go on horseback. But no, they're just running the entire way. They find the bridge has been destroyed, coming to the conclusion it was lightning, because lightning just does that to stone apparently. The implication though, and what Galadriel states, is that this was the work of Sauron. So they need to find another route, one of which would add 2 weeks to their journey, the other through the hills of Tir Gorfard, which would be the faster route. Although looking at this shot right here, could they not just jump across or climb down and up the other side? At the start of season 1, Galadriel climbed a cliff with a knife and no rope. Surely this would be a walk in the park. Another thing that sticks out at me is that if this bridge is the quickest route, that would mean the messengers sent by Gil-galad would have seen this. So then why wouldn't they report back to Lindon, especially when, as we find out later, 2 messengers were sent? So why didn't one of them go back and report? Then this wouldn't have caused them any problems. Surely other people take this route as well, so you'd expect word to eventually get out, but I guess not. Galadriel then gets herself a brain fart, a warning from the ring not to go that way. She tells the group they shouldn't take the route through the hills of Tir Gorfard, as there's an evil there, ancient and full of malice. A route which Sauron means for them to go, so they should go another. Clearly forgetting that this means nothing to Elrond when you've been told this by the ring, which he still believes to be evil. And I don't even know what you're worried about, considering you're the bestest fighter in the land. Elrond makes it clear he doesn't care what our ring has to say, so they'd be taking the already decided path, which Galadriel refuses to accept, time and time again, so Elrond has to keep trying to make her understand that they won't under any circumstance take counsel from her ring, and nor will she. And if she can't accept those terms, she can fuck off back to Lindon. Which just brings me back to why Elrond would even want her to go, and even if he did accept that, she shouldn't have been able to bring her ring with her. He believes it's evil, yet he allowed her to bring it. He seems to be very inconsistent with this in certain aspects. Galadriel, after being told to accept this or piss off, childishly says she would like to go back to Lindon, but she won't because she doesn't want to see any of this company slain. Because that's the Galadriel we know. She cares deeply about her friends, except the time she didn't tell Celebrimbor Halbrand was Sauron, which would have avoided all this. And that's where we leave them for now. Which means we're on our way back to Rhûn. Great. We find Not-Gandalf looking for Nori and Poppy, who, based on being blown away by a tornado of his own making, should be dead. But they're probably not gonna be, are they? Not-Gandalf stumbles across a goat farm and the farmer himself, ignorantly throwing plants. He asks whether the farmer's seen two halflings, and the farmer's response is he sees that Not-Gandalf has found the goat, which he says wasn't what he was looking for.
Well, there's what you're searching for, and there's what you find now, isn't there?
Oh. You're the giant dickhead character who just states the obvious in a long and annoying fucking way. Not-Gandalf tells him about the stars above his hill, and he hoped by coming here he would find Nori, and the response is, there's stars above most hills. You're not going to be of any help, are you? Not-Gandalf's star map then blows away mysteriously and leads him to an old willow with a branch he believes is a staff from his dream. Something he thinks about every branch and staff he comes across.
It's not dissimilar from the staff I saw in my dream.
No.
He then attempts to break the branch off and gets himself swallowed up by it. And that cuts us to Nori and Poppy. How did they survive this? They got swept off by a tornado, assumedly throwing them high into the air and pretty far away based on them being nowhere near Not-Gandalf. Eventually dropped to the ground, and somehow they haven't ended up dead. Okay then. I guess they're main characters, so they can't die unless it's off screen. They notice one of the scavengers, so decide to jump off a cliff to hide.
Where'd you lot come from?
Just what this show needed, more fucking Harfoots.
I wonder if it's loaded.
So yet again, we just have people randomly bumping into each other in a massive desert, who just so happens to be this gimp that accidentally gives away the fact he's from a village after Nori questions if he stole the water he's carrying, because we need to give Nori somewhere to hide from the scavengers. And that cuts us over to the village, which before they go in are given ground rules in dealing with their leader, the Gund. They're told by what they call this geriatric nobody that there's 4 rules. Never look the Gund in the eye, always stand 3 steps back, and never call her the Gund. That's only 3. Alright, a set up for an unfunny joke, I guess. And that takes them into the village where Nori is confused about Harfoots living in holes.
That's because we're not Harfoots. We're Stores.
Hi.
So we've in fact got ourselves a shitload more Hobbit characters. We only just escaped the other ones. But who knows, maybe these ones won't be a bunch of psychopaths. Although, I might be getting ahead of myself because the Gund at least is an irritating little arsehole. She rips into nobody for bringing them here, which she somehow knows the scavengers are after them. Saying that, something I think applies to the writers themselves, that if they put his brain in a vulture, it would fly backwards.
Be nicer to him.
Are you talking back sass to me?
So apparently they're trying to imply here, and when they first met, that there's going to be a romance between them. And I could really not give a shit. This is when nobody remembers the 4th rule about talking back, and it's really, really funny. The Gund then asks for a reason why she shouldn't just hand them back to those that are hunting them. Yeah, I think I'd take that back about them not being psychopaths. Nori then gives herself an ego boost, saying that she's walked across rivers, mountains and deserts to help her friend find his destiny, one the fate of the world may depend on. I mean, you've been looking for a fucking staff. That's not very important, is it? I'm not even sure what Nori actually provides Not-Gandalf with outside of them being friends. Poppy has literally been of more use. They then ask who this friend of theirs is, which, as Nori says, he's a wizard. And of course, because we're in Looney Tune land, the Gund says that the only wizard here is the Dark Wizard, and the last friend they need is a friend of his.
Tie him up.
So first of all, if the gun knows the scavengers, who we later find out she knows works for the Dark Wizard, are hunting Nori and Poppy, then that would imply the Dark Wizard isn't their fucking friend. Second of all, Nori doesn't just explain herself when she has the opportunity to, and that would have avoided all of this. But no, we can't have people talk like people and just explain themselves, I guess because we need to waste more time with this pointless shit. Yet again, the Rune storyline, which is now split into two, only exists to be padding. And we're still not done with it yet, as we're taken over to the Dark Wizard who's visited by a scavenger. The same one who gave us that retarded plan to capture Not-Gandalf. Having returned empty-handed, he says that Not-Gandalf is more powerful than they anticipated, and after conjuring a sandstorm, killed 2 of his men. And that's because 1, your plan was shit, which originally was supposed to be using the Harfoots as leverage to get him to go with you. And 2, you didn't even do that plan. You turned up on horseback and allowed them to see you rather than get them by surprise, grabbed Nori and Poppy, put a gun to their heads, forcing Not-Gandalf to give himself up. And thirdly, as I stated in the breakdown of episode 2, the scavengers didn't account for him being a wizard, which they fucking knew he was. And now they've come back with their tails between their legs, saying they didn't know he was this powerful. He was a wizard. What did you expect? Maybe if you had an actual plan, it wouldn't have ended this way. They then tell the Dark Wizard that Not-Gandalf is making his way north to the Hermit, which is this dick. He then asks about the halflings and is told that the scavengers are still scouring the desert.
You are either very foolish or very brave.
No, he's a fucking idiot. I wouldn't trust him to tie his shoelaces. The Dark Wizard tells them that the Harfoots will be their sole concern while he deals with Not-Gandalf. I guess he's forgotten his deal with the scavengers, which was if they capture Not-Gandalf, the Dark Wizard would cure their skin condition. And now after they've came back from a massive failure, you don't take issue with that. You've now got to do their job while they go and play in the sand with the Harfoots, which they're probably going to fail at as well. We then cut back to Not-Gandalf and the Hermit for some more pain. Because the thing about the Hermit is he annoyingly states the obvious, talks in riddles, which means everything takes longer than it needs to be. Something which we already have enough of with the elves, we don't need fucking more of it. The Hermit speaks to the tree and forces it to spit out Not-Gandalf, who once is free asks who this person is.
Folk used to call me Bombadil, Tom Bombadil.
Oh, so that's who it is. I imagine everyone that wanted him in the original trilogy is very happy about this, although I'm very doubtful. We then cut to Not-Gandalf taking a bath because that's the best way to spend your time, and I guess that means he no longer gives a shit about whether Nori and Poppy are dead. That seems to have been flung out the window for now. Maybe he read the script. He hears a woman singing along with Tom, which he denies for another unfunny joke. And we soon start to realise that Tom has magical abilities after lighting the candles all at once. He asks what Not-Gandalf was hoping to find under the stars he's been looking for, which he says was in hopes of finding Nori. Oh, so he does remember, although based on how he left the Harfoots, he should believe that he's killed them. So you would think his behaviour would be a lot less relaxed. But even if he knew they were alive, I don't know why he'd think they'd come here. It's the daytime, so no stars are out, and it's easy to assume they were thrown far away from where they were before. Not-Gandalf's behaviour would suggest he isn't that worried, because surely he would have got here, realised Nori wasn't here, and continued to look. Even try to find a high enough peak to get a bird's eye view. But no, his plan just seems to be waiting here when he doesn't know if they're alive or dead. The conversation then moves on after Tom turns his map into bread, and Not-Gandalf continues to question who he is.
What are you?
Don't you know my name yet? That's the only answer.
Why have they decided to make this guy a complete prick? I don't even know why Not-Gandalf hasn't left already. We then learn that Tom is as old as the world itself, and that's the quick version. He then causes his fire to almost cook his lamb alive. Why does he have a fire on in a desert? Don't know. Not-Gandalf asks him to teach him this magic, which I'm a little confused by when he's done more magic than Tom has. All Tom's done is light some candles, whereas Not-Gandalf brought a tree back to life. I'm pretty sure one of them is more magical compared to these parlour tricks. Not-Gandalf then asks if he can teach him to wield a staff, because, yeah, we're ripping off Empire Strikes Back, and Tom is our Yoda.
Wizard's staff is like a name. It's yours to wield already.
Oh, fuck off. He then agrees to help him until they hear scavengers in the distance, and Not-Gandalf asks why they're hunting him, only to be told he's not the first wizard who's visited him, that years ago there was another, the Dark Wizard. Someone who he says sought to control magic and now controls much of Rune, but still hungers for more. Not-Gandalf questions whether he believes the Dark Wizard's evil will spread.
Not without an ally far more powerful even than himself. Sauron.
How does he know anything about Sauron? He's been stuck in the wild ever since he arrived. Unless we're supposed to assume he got this from his dream? Tom says that if Sauron and the Dark Wizard were to combine into one, this would destroy Middle-earth. Not-Gandalf asks if Tom can stop it, which he says has nothing to do with him. That he's a wanderer, not a warrior, and that great deeds are left to those it was given to. Not-Gandalf realises that it's in fact his task to face Sauron.
Your task is to face them both.
This really is just Empire Strikes Back. Our hero meets a hermit who's actually a master of magic, who's now going to train him to defeat Sauron. And that returns us to the race to Eregion, which seems to have now slowed down. I guess everybody forgot they were in a rush. Earlier they were running, and now they're slowly walking through the forest. We're told the place we are is in fact the Barrow-downs, a place where kings and lords were laid to rest during ancient days. We hear voices on the wind, which one of the elves eventually hears, and then sees a pair of bright blue eyes in the distance. Which, when questioned by Galadriel, he doesn't mention, and I don't know why. He just tells her what he heard. Elrond finds the dead messengers Gil-galad sent, causing them to realise they should move on. I don't know why that wasn't already the case. You're not investigating a crime scene. But that's what they've been acting like this entire scene, as if they're having a look for clues. They're clearly trying to build this up as a horror scene, only it doesn't fit with what the characters' motivations are. They should be running through, or at the very least walking at a fast pace, when their goal is to get to Eregion quickly and have already been delayed by the broken bridge. So honestly, I don't know why they haven't had it so they come straight through, see the bodies of the messengers, and then start building tension from that. Hearing whispers and seeing bright eyes in the dark, that would make this scene line up better with what the characters are trying to achieve. I guess his super hearing failed him, which seems to be way too common for elves in this series. But that's our first kill, who Galadriel tries to save and fails to prevent him from being pulled into a dark hole where we hear the crunching of his bones. Which brings us to the long-anticipated Barrow-wights. Galadriel explains what these creatures are, although it's strange she doesn't know that the Barrow-wights are impervious to their weapons. And the same goes for Elrond. He knows exactly what they are, and soon remembers that the only weapons that can kill them, as he says according to lore, only the blades with which they were buried with can kill them. So I'm just curious why you didn't think of that until the last minute. You should have led with that as soon as you seen them. Why waste the energy pointlessly swinging your swords and shooting your arrows when you know they won't fucking work? To then wait and go, oh yeah, these swords won't work. It seems like the only point was to make you concerned for a split second. Although, why would I be to begin with when I know they're going to be fine and I don't particularly care about them because you haven't given me a reason to? Also, I don't know what was going on with the Barrow-wights. They seem to have a cooldown mechanic. They stood there, not doing anything, allowing Elrond to get the swords to defeat them. Why would they not just try to kill them straight away, as opposed to just staring at them? Nothing here seemed to work in a logical way. Elrond goes to the trouble of fighting them when he knows it's pointless without specific weapons. The Barrow-wights weren't hard to defeat because they didn't act like they wanted to kill these people, making Sauron's plan pretty useless when he went to the trouble of destroying a bridge to direct people here, and then to awaken Barrow-wights to hopefully kill messengers and Galadriel so he can make the rings without interruption. Only the Barrow-wights were fucking useless to the point of I don't even know why the messengers had a hard time. They wouldn't have even had to fight them, they could have just ran straight through. So it's really not a great plan on Sauron's part. And that takes us away to Pelargir, where the search for Theo begins, starting at the camp he was taken from in the previous episode. Arondir notices an axe and comes to the conclusion that the wild men wouldn't leave their weapons behind because to a wild man, an axe head is worth more than gold. So this has to be the doing of something else. Arondir then notices a flame in the distance, so goes to investigate, finding a severed arm and a body pierced in spikes, clearly showing the wild men had nothing to do with Theo's disappearance. After a night of searching, they return to Pelargir to regroup and rethink what their next move is. And it becomes clear Arondir hasn't explained to the people what he found for some reason. One guy says that they should raid the wild men camps, even though it was the wild men they found dead, so it's obviously not fucking them. Arondir finally explains that what he saw, he doesn't believe it was done by mortal men. The people decide to search for Theo further afield, although Estrid tells them they do better to look north. Something which is gonna raise suspicion, especially when she goes on to say that she spent weeks searching for loved ones and promises there's wild men there and worse. Which already brings to mind the question that if it's as bad as you say, how exactly did you get through that area unharmed? We know Estrid is one of the wild men after the previous episode's reveal, so why would you even say anything which would only raise suspicion, which it does for Arondir, as we're about to see. As we meet Isildur and Estrid by the aqueduct, where the show attempts to tell us there's a romance between them, which I don't really buy considering they barely know each other and Estrid is betrothed to somebody else. So if you wanted people to believe this, I don't know why you didn't build it up from when they met and their journey to Pelargir. But a big problem this show has is that they never take advantage of characters on a journey, instead they just teleport them where they need to be and create things from out of nowhere, rather than seizing the opportunity to build characters and relationships between those characters, and that's why this fake romance is to create some drama where it otherwise wouldn't exist. Arondir eventually turns up and questions Estrid about how long she spent among the wild men, where she says she was hiding. He also wonders if they ever did her any harm, the reason being that he noticed a wound on her neck that looks to be recent. And that's the wound she gave herself in the previous episode, and this is her excuse.
I fell asleep by the fire.
That's gotta be the worst fucking lie I've ever heard. You fell asleep by the fire. My follow-up question to that, which would cause the entire lie to fall apart, would be that if you fell asleep by the fire, then why isn't your hair burnt as well? When it would be impossible to fall asleep by a fire where it only burnt a tiny part of your neck. Arondir tells her that we all do stupid things sometimes in moments of hopelessness, so this is her moment to explain herself. Instead, she does this. So she's really just trying to make herself look as bad as possible at this point. We do later find out that she's not evil, so why would this be your reaction when you know Arondir and Isildur are the good guys, and would understand if you just explained everything to them? But again, because we gotta have that drama, just like with Nori earlier on, we can't have her just explain herself like people tend to do when they're put into a bad situation.
Self-burn. Wildmen do it to hide the mark of Ada.
Seems a little pointless once people have caught on that that's what you do to hide the mark. So I don't know why Estrid even decided to do that, especially when you're trying to hide it from the vision of an elf. Arondir says that they would have checked for Adar's mark if it wasn't for the fact she came in with Isildur, which only makes Arondir look bad. He knew that she was a random stranger, considering Isildur came to Middle-earth alone. This is someone he just bumped into in the wild, so you should have checked anyway. Especially when you value the lives of the people in Pelargir who are also under your protection. Arondir decides that Estrid will lead them north to the other wild men. Did he forget it wasn't the wild men that took Theo? So this might not be the best place to go? Also, why does Arondir even need her when he has the ability to track Theo's movements, so this isn't very necessary. The three of them make their way north, and we're given our first burst of drama between Estrid and Isildur, which, as I mentioned, has come from nowhere. Isildur is upset, questioning what her plan was before she saw that he was Númenórean.
Wait, you don't even have a betrothed.
Would you rather I died in Mordor?
I don't know.
The writers really do think they got themselves some legitimate drama, don't they? Arondir finds some petals along the ground, just like he found back at the Wildmen camp. Finally concluding that Theo wasn't taken by men after all. I thought he already knew that, but okay. We then cut to Theo, who wakes up among the Wildmen in some kind of natural prison.
What's out there? Don't know yet, but whatever they are, they're big.
We then cut back to Arondir walking through a pool of mud in an area of chopped down trees. Estrid tries to convince him to free her hands. I don't know why she'd even try that. She had the opportunity to explain, and she didn't.
It's all right.
Out of all the characters you could pick, why is Isildur the clumsy, useless clown character? Fucking idiot can't even walk straight without falling over. Arondir has to try and save him and they're both sucked into the quicksand, leaving Estrid, who has her opportunity to escape, and doesn't take it. Instead, she gets a long stick to save them with. I don't know what chance she thinks she has when whatever pulled them in was stronger than Arondir. I don't think they've really thought about the design with this creature. The way its mouth is would mean when it grabbed Isildur, assumedly by the leg, it would have tore it off. But no, they're both fine apparently, except for being covered in a little mud after Arondir kills it from behind, while also finding their dinner, which is where we'll eventually catch back up with them. We then return to the Harfoots, who are still tied up and have yet to explain themselves. The village leader tells them they'll be cast out at sunrise because Sturs come first. Nori says that Sadok would have done the same thing, which I'm not surprised by considering they left their own for dead. But it's very lucky Nori mentions Sadok because now the leader wants to know who it is, as she explains he was their trail finder, Sadok Burrows. This causes the leader to take Nori to a mural telling her the story of Romanus Burrows, who left the Sturs after having a dream of what he called the Suzat, a place with endless streams of cold water and hills soft enough for a family to dig a hole and live in it within a month. I think I know where this is going. She says the Stur that left promised to come back and gather them once he found it, but never did, and asks Nori if where she comes from, if it looks like the painting, and if so, did she come to lead them there?
Nori must never found the Suzat. We don't have a home.
That's a very strange reaction to not having a home when you're from a nomadic group. The idea of people having homes should almost be alien to them. So to cry about not having a home is not something I believe to be the expected reaction from Nori. When she entered the village earlier, she was confused about people like them living in holes and remaining there. So the idea that after one scene it becomes something Nori wants for herself isn't possible. Again, this is something that should take time and be built to. She shouldn't have her entire thoughts changed in one episode. We need to see her ingratiate herself into the village and see all of the unique ways they live that she gradually starts to want for herself. But no, I almost forgot this was Rings of Power. And I think it's pretty obvious that this plotline is going to lead to Nori founding the Shire. That's if we reach season 5 of this hell show. From what the village leader has told us about the dream of hills and streams, a place called the Suzat, the Shire, that's a very good indication of where we're going. They're both eventually interrupted as there's been a sighting of the scavengers.
To what do we owe the pleasure?
I will admit that was very amusing. After getting slapped the shit out of, the scavengers ask about the Harfoots and the village leader decides to protect them after all, telling them that there are no Harfoots here, only Sturs.
Do you know why we wear these masks?
No one cared who I was till I put on the mask.
When we return with him, you will find out for yourselves.
So they're not even going to have a look around when they are right over there. It wouldn't even take them that long. I don't understand why they came, asked if they were here, and assumed that they were anyway, and just decided to leave. So I think I was correct in my assumption that the scavengers would fuck this up too. Not only has the Dark Wizard got to deal with Not-Gandalf, now he's got to deal with this. But I suppose that saves Nori and Poppy for another episode. And that leads us back to our ragtag team of elves for a conversation between Elrond and Galadriel, who tells him that she knows he believes the ring is deceiving her, but she believes it's guiding her, and that following it may be their only path to victory. Something which we've already been over. You believing something isn't the same as it being true. You're also the one wearing the ring. To Elrond, obviously you would say that. Because if the ring's evil, that's what it would want you to believe, and Elrond. Which as of yet has not done anything to take you to victory. So far, all it's done is warn you about Celebrimbor and the Barrow-wites. We're also just covering the same ground. You and Elrond have already had this conversation. So I'd like to think we'd get something new rather than the same arguments which are just terrible. Elrond questions if there's no point at which the cost of victory becomes too great, saying she's yet to reach that point. Which I can believe because there is no cost too great for Galadriel. She only cares about what she wants and very little of the consequences. So this is something she says doesn't terrify her because the suffering of a world ruled by Sauron terrifies her more. So the writers are just lying to us at this point, because if she was truly terrified of this outcome, she would have told everybody, including Celebrimbor, that Halbrand was Sauron. But she didn't, because she was more interested in her image and not letting people know how retarded she was for not realising he was Sauron sooner. So the idea she's terrified of Sauron coming into power is complete bullshit. That's not the character we've been shown. She goes on saying that with this ring, she can see what they stand to lose if they fail in the task ahead of them. You need a ring to tell you that. You don't just know.
Why is everyone so fucking stupid?
Elrond then tells a story of his father, who foresaw that Celebrimbor's life would be in his hands, so he'll choose the path that gives him the best hope of protecting that. Which again, your actions have said otherwise. If you truly believe that, why the fuck didn't you want to go to Eregion straight away? Instead, you pissed about pointlessly building a boat, and that was because we needed a delay to let Sauron get to Celebrimbor. Galadriel then says more bullshit she doesn't believe, saying that protecting that which is most fragile is a task given to all elves. A task which she promises will result in more painful sacrifices. As if that's something she's ever taken on board, she sacrificed absolutely nothing to protect, as she says, what's most fragile.
Galadriel.
And these visions, at least I think we're supposed to believe, has caused Galadriel to instantly contradict herself. She went from protecting that which is most fragile to now making Elrond promise to put opposing Sauron above all else, even her life. Meaning, even if there's people to save, to only concern yourself with Sauron. So I believe the visions are there to cause her to change her mind, only Elrond doesn't say anything about it, even though the contradiction came instantly. Elrond says he'll make no promises which are born of the ring, but then he swears defeating Sauron will come first, even before Galadriel. That's literally doing what you said you wouldn't do. It's basically, I won't do it, but I will do it because I decided. When you're still doing what the ring wanted anyway.
Forgive me, Commander. We heard drums.
And that allows us to escape from the elves, even if it is for a moment. As we return to Arondir, who decides to put the key to Estrid's hand restraints beside her, leaving it for Isildur to decide whether to free her or not. Which is an incredibly retarded decision when she still hasn't told you anything about who she really is and where her loyalties lie. Even though she saved you, there should still be trust issues between her, Isildur and Arondir. At least there would be if we had intelligent characters who played it safe, especially in the world and time they exist in. But no, Arondir's gonna leave it up to Isildur, who of course decides to free her because he's so in love with her apparently.
You motherfucker, you!
Yeah, definitely didn't see that coming from 1,000 miles away. And why is she only doing this now when she already had the opportunity to escape earlier? Arondir and Isildur wouldn't have died from the swamp monster anyway, they got away without your help. So why would you do this now? Have you forgotten there's a fucking elf with a bow right over there that's now got you in his sights? You could have just went along with this and left without them knowing, because now there's no way of you escaping and you're back to where you left off in chains. She says her reason for trying to escape is because forgiveness doesn't come to people like her and the people of Pelargir will cast her out. Have you maybe tried explaining to people the circumstances of your being forced into slavery by Adar? Maybe that would go a long way. Isildur has even given you the bonus of saying he won't let them cast you out. And still you're fully convinced there's no possible way to be accepted. Are you that fucking brain dead? Yes. Yes, she is. Arondir shouts at her to drop the sword because of something he's noticed that may jump to conclusions and take offence. Estrid refuses to do so, and then something happens that would lead you to believe she's dead, but ultimately isn't. So that should be a death right there if getting smashed in the face by a fucking tree didn't do it, slamming your head into a rock at full force will, but of course we're in Clownland where the rocks are made of paper mache. Arondir stops the Ent before it goes on to kill what should have already been killed, announcing himself as Arondir of the Greenwood. And their first question is, has he ever touched an axe to wooded life? Which is a bit of a stupid question from an Ent when they should recognise an elf when they see one. A group of beings who love all planted life, so very unlikely to be the case.
To my great pain I have, but...
Yes, Arondir did in Season 1 when the orcs refused to just go the fuck around the tree, but why would Arondir stupidly tell them that when A, it could result in your death, and B, it's a long story, so there isn't much point in saying anything. To tell them, well, I did chop down a tree, but I was forced to. There was a group of orcs, you see, they made me a slave, they were building a trench for water to go down, and set off a volcano. That's a lot of information involved, so maybe just save that for when your life isn't at risk. A second Ent appears and notices the sword, which Arondir quickly explains isn't for felling trees, but orcs, leading to the Ent mentioning that an army of them marched through here maiming trees. Arondir quickly asks about the army of orcs and gets no response as one of the Ents flies off the handle. So Arondir asks her forgiveness and promises to protect the trees. I mean, you fucked up with a human, so maybe a tree is more your speed. And with that, the Ents let the people they've captured, including Theo, free.
Estrid.
And Isildur gets himself cucked by Estrid's missing husband, which seems to be a sore one for him, even though he only knew this woman for a couple of days, who will probably never show up ever again, making all of this pointless. Which is why I believe all of it was to add a sense of drama without actually putting in the work and nothing more. Arondir reunites with Theo, who thanks him for saving him and keeping his promise, which I assume he made to Bronwyn before she died. But now that promise is done, even though it isn't because he's a 14-year-old boy who brings himself nothing but trouble, Arondir now has another promise to keep, saying he needs to track down the army of orcs and maybe have another chance to confront Adar, and gives Theo the choice to go with him, only to be turned down because Theo has promises of his own, and so Arondir names him Lord of Pelargir, a 14-year-old boy. Why would any of the people listen to him? Because Arondir doesn't go back with him. So we're just left to assume he turned up in Pelargir, naming himself the Lord, and everybody was perfectly fine with that. I could believe it if Theo was someone who commanded respect and had a certain way about him and made intelligent decisions. But that isn't who he is, and I'm not even sure when or if we'll ever see Theo again. Which, if it turns out he doesn't, this entire storyline has been pointless. The only one result of all of this is that Arondir is going to track down the orcs, which will probably take him to the anticipated battle of Eregion. Outside of that, there's literally nothing of worth here. And finally, we're brought back to the elves who last we seen discovered drumming of some kind in the distance, which is because Adar and the orcs are on the march towards Eregion, which I assume they know where Sauron is since Adar sent an orc to follow him when he left the Southlands. The elves are confused about finding Adar and wonder if him and Sauron are in league together again or at war. Elrond realises that Gil-galad needs to hear of this before the Legion of Orcs do whatever they came here to do. Oh, so they do shoot horses with arrows. I guess Beric got lucky. This has also led to one of the elves getting hit with a stray, which brings the attention of the orcs after smelling their blood. The reason why he's randomly been shot is because of this. So the ring apparently has the ability to heal mortal wounds, and I'm going to assume that when something similar happens later down the road, this ring will not be used in that way. The main reason we've had this happen now is so Elrond can start to be convinced that the ring isn't evil. Although, if I was an evil ring, I would want you to see this to make you believe I'm perfectly safe, so this really doesn't change anything. Galadriel tells Elrond and the rest of the team to get to Lindon and she'll distract them. Wait, what? You don't need to do that, you could just send 1 or 2 elves to Lindon. Why would you send all of them? I don't know why she's expecting to beat all these orcs. What exactly is her end goal with this decision? The orcs haven't spotted them yet, so why don't they just find a way to get around them and continue on to Eregion? But no, everyone's got to go to Lindon except Galadriel because she's gonna do something. She gives Elrond a ring so she doesn't lose it to the enemy when again, she could hand this to any elf, send them back to Lindon and hang on to Elrond. But no, she instead decides to face the army of orcs all on her own, which she starts by throwing knives and shooting arrows while running towards them, when if you have ranged weapons, why would you bother to close the distance between yourself and the enemy? The orcs also seem to be highly flammable. Why would they burst into flames from a tiny bit of fire on the end of an arrow? Galadriel jumps onto the horse and flails around as if this is an advantage. Even though the orcs have bows, they forgot to use them. She then throws what seems to be a napalm lantern, and again more orcs burst into flames. We quickly cut back to the elves who believe she sacrificed herself to save them. No, she didn't have to do any of this. Elrond tells them the truth that she did it to save the ring, which again doesn't add up when all of this was unnecessary. She's just gonna die for no logical reason when she could have sent 2 elves back to Lindon and the rest carried on to Eregion. What exactly is she gonna do on her own? It seems to me this is just another way to delay them. This entire journey is now pointless.
Go back to the shadow!
Go back to the shadow!
Could you not steal lines from better things? She's then pulled from the horse by chains, and Adar appears mainly so Galadriel doesn't die, which she would have if he wasn't nearby. She then doesn't take the opportunity to shoot him, even though she had a pretty decent chunk of time to do so, unless this was her plan, which I don't believe it was. And that brings us to the end of episode 4, which means we finally hit the halfway point of season 2. So I guess we'll find out next time what kind of situation Galadriel has got herself into. She'll be perfectly fine, I imagine. But that brings us to yet again the overview of this episode. So let's start with everything going on in Rune, which is now split into 2 because we definitely needed that. We've now got Not-Gandalf and Tom Bombadil in an Empire Strikes Back ripoff, where Not-Gandalf seems to have forgotten his what should be dead friends, and instead begged his master to train him to wield magic, specifically with a staff, even though all Tom did was light some fucking candles, which isn't really a sign of a great teacher. But as we're told, Not-Gandalf is eventually going to face the Dark Wizard and Sauron, which I'm not sure how that will come about. When the entire arc for Not-Gandalf this season is to get a fucking staff, that's all we're getting. Maybe next season he'll get his hat. But for this episode itself, we've still gone nowhere outside of finding Tom, who dragged everything out even further because he can't talk plainly or politely, just an all-around annoying prick. And the amount of time we've spent, all we've got out of it is he's going to train Not-Gandalf. Then we have the second part of this plotline with Nori and Poppy, who should be dead, but instead bumps into some retard randomly in the desert who leads them to his village of Sturs, where Nori can't explain herself straight away when it came to the leader assuming they were friends with the Dark Wizard, so that was dragged out yet again and eventually leading to Nori finding out about the dream, which involved the Shire. Making it obvious that's where all this is going, because it seems to me that's all this show tries to do, is give origins to places and landmarks, and very little with their characters. They've already jumped straight to this is the life Nori wants, even though her entire thing is that she wants to get out and see the world. So why would she be upset about, as she puts it, not having a home? That isn't your character. So a lot more needs to be done, but everything in this show, as I've said before, involves nothing happening for long periods of time, to then speed through important things that actually need to be set up and built around. If they really spent the time doing things like that, no time would be wasted, but it is, and Pelargir is not that different. We're yet again on another side quest searching for Theo, where Arondir comes to the conclusion that he wasn't taken by mortal men. Something the villagers can't quite comprehend, and this is where Estrid raises suspicion. She's given multiple opportunities to come clean even when prompted by Arondir, but instead gives terrible lies about her wound and then tries to attack Arondir and run off only to get caught. This sends her, Arondir and Isildur to rescue Theo, and it's only the 3 of them for some reason. When surely you would want more people with you in case you're attacked if the prisoner tries to escape, but I guess if they did that, things wouldn't play out the way the writers wanted it to, because we need our drama between Isildur and Estrid even though it comes out of nowhere. She's given a great opportunity to escape when they're attacked by a monster, instead doesn't take it, but then does later. When they're eventually led somewhere, they set up camp, and Arondir has the great idea to let this fucking idiot decide whether to free Estrid or not. He of course decides to, and it all backfires because Estrid is retarded. She pulls his sword on him, the reason being is because she believes she won't be accepted even though she's yet to try and explain herself. She also does this while Arondir is just over there with his bow, so she isn't going to be able to escape, so it was all pointless. She's then smashed across the face by a tree and slammed into a rock and doesn't die, somehow. And we're given our meeting with the Ents who took Theo and a few other wild men and didn't kill them, yet they killed the other ones. Why exactly do they have them prisoner? Is their plan to hold them hostage? We don't know. It doesn't actually make sense. The entire purpose is because we need Arondir to learn about the army of orcs, everything else has no point to it. Theo's released and now his and Arondir's drama is all cleared up for no reason. He's just had a change of heart because he was a prisoner for a day, he hasn't gone through anything that would relate to him all of a sudden being less of a dick. We then have Estrid who finds her husband and in the process stomps on Isildur's heart because he apparently loved her. I don't know why we wasted any time on it if it's going nowhere, but like I said, this entire plotline existed so Arondir could follow the army of orcs. It serves no other substantive purpose. We then have the elves finally leave for Eregion, a 450-mile journey which they decide to do on foot without any good reason. Elrond is also forced into taking Galadriel and her ring when he still doesn't trust it. And Gil-galad didn't want her to face Sauron again in case she were corrupted by him, but now it's fine. He also only gives them a group of 4 instead of the army on his doorstep, when he could at the very least have soldiers prepared to go to Eregion in the chance that Sauron is there. He could even set up a relay so word can reach the army quickly, but decides not to do anything as smart as that. Instead, we're left with Elrond, Galadriel, and 4 others, none of which we know anything about. They're just there to exist. When you could actually develop them into characters, even the slightest thing, instead of Swordman, Swordman 2, Mysterious Mute, and Map Guy. Galadriel handpicked these people. Why? Well, we don't know, because Amazon couldn't be bothered to tell us. The first hurdle they reach is the broken bridge, which they should have already been warned about by one of the messengers sent by Gil-galad. So this sends them to the Barrow-downs for complete incompetence for the Barrow-wites who weren't that much of a threat, which the writers try to make a threat by having Elrond not use the knowledge he has to defeat them. And if the Barrow-wites acted like they wanted to actually kill them, Elrond wouldn't have had time to remember they're impervious to elvish weapons. But this was all a part of Sauron's plan to direct people here, and he didn't account for the Barrow-wites being shit. We're eventually given a conversation with Galadriel and Elrond, which we've already heard before, and its purpose, just like with Galadriel healing the wounded elf, is to convince Elrond the rings are safe, which it shouldn't. They then bump into an army of orcs marching to Eregion and fucks up their entire plan without any sense to it. They could easily evade them and make it to Eregion and at the same time send 1 or 2 people back to Lindon to warn Gil-galad. Instead, Galadriel makes the decision, even though Elrond's in charge and they just made it to Eregion, to send all of them straight back to Lindon so Galadriel can get captured by Adar so we're yet again delayed. What her plan is, she doesn't seem to have one, she just needlessly gives herself over to the enemy when the priority is to warn Celebrimbor. He should know what's coming so he can evacuate civilians. That thought didn't even cross her mind. For all she knew, she'd be dead and the other elves would be in Lindon and Celebrimbor's fucked. And that is episode 4. Not only a complete waste of time, it's also very shit. But I suppose that gets us to the halfway point later than I would have liked. So once again, thanks for watching and I'll see you on the next one.